Welcome back to the Hi-Fi Cave. The other day I made a video about my journey on open baffles and how I got to where I am today. Just, if you haven't seen it, check it out. Check it out, I'll put the link in the description below, or just go to my channel. When I was going through the pictures to assemble this video, because essentially the video is just, it's just a roll of pictures and I just do commentary on top of it. Anyway, going through all these pictures, a lot of pictures I didn't show in this video because it had nothing to do with the open baffles. Realized how much hi-fi gear actually I've gone through over the last several years. And I was reminded that, wow, a lot of them didn't resonate with me. They didn't, at first, they didn't even sound good. And at the time, I realized that what my perception was at the time of what good sound was, it's not that it was wrong, but compared to what I know now, when I think back about myself in those days, you know, more than 5, I don't know, 7, 8 years plus, I realized that my sonic taste was perhaps immature, or inexperienced. Not that it's bad or anything. It's just a difference between what I know now. It's interesting because 10 plus years ago, I thought I knew my shit when it came to hi-fi. Today, it's exponential how much more I know and understand. And today I feel like I barely scratched the surface. The more you know, the dumber you feel. It's because you become aware, or anyways, I become aware of how much there is still to learn and explore. And now that I have a better idea of how to actually really make things sound better together. And it's a hard thing to actually describe. There's a lot of factors, and generally speaking, it boils down to a lot of trial and error. To just look at specs and to think that you know how to match it, it's a starting point. And I think you can, just by having experience with understanding what specification of an amplifier to and speakers, how to put the chances on your side of success, or increasing the chances of success of you picking the right amplifier for the right speaker. Fucking get lost in my thoughts talking about this. How do people do these monologues just like in one take? Like ABX, James, he's good at this. He's good. Man, he's like the hi-fi lawnmower, man, the autopilot lawnmower. All you got to do is you pull that cord, get him going. And if he has spent enough time with the gear, he can go, man. He's going to talk, and he'll tell you for like 15, 20 minutes, all of the little details, one take, one shot, no editing required. I wish I could do that. I can't. I got to turn into freaking Steven Spielbergo because I have to constantly edit. Things go wrong. Very bad luck with gear. Fucking batteries run out all the time. My microphone clipping and all this kind of stuff. And of course I hear it in editing as well. It's just that after you've done I don't know how many takes and X amount of time to do this, like I've family I got to take care of. I have a regular full-time job. Like I can't sit here and do 25 hours of footage to then come up with a 20-minute video. I suck. What can I say? And recently on Aaron's Audio Corner, he made a video about not expecting epiphanies. Guys, he can properly describe all of the traps that we've all fallen in over the years. And I think that for him to make a video like this reminds me of like when I made my 2 videos about how to reach your hi-fi endgame. Come to think about it, it's like we could give you all of our lessons learned over our journey, over our experience, and we catalog this essentially in videos. Because I think that's what most people on YouTube are doing. I mean, some people, it's actually a legitimate business. They're reviewers, they're influencers. They push the products that that manufacturers will have an arrangement with them. It's basically a marketing deal. But not all the YouTubers in a hi-fi are like that. Personally, I don't have any deals with anyone. Maybe it's because I've gotten actually 3 offers so far. 4 that I entertained and did not actually, that there wasn't any red flags going off, because these offers were coming from people who were writing me emails using Google Translate, and nothing made sense. And when I would check out the website that they were sending me this offer for affiliate links, it just looked shady. And anyways, I'm not talking about those. So sharing our experience, I think like anything else in life, whether you go to school, whether you read a book, whether you watch or you hear a podcast, whether you go to a conference or assist or watch a presentation, I think we're all just going to remember a small percentage of what's there. 10% if we're lucky. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying if you're already very experienced, and some out there think they're very experienced, but they're not. It's easy for us to get that level of experience just from reading articles, watching videos, debate others online. And it is experience, but it's theoretical experience. When it's actually time to build a system and making it sound good in difficult conditions, like an audio show, having seen people set up their rooms at audio shows, I could tell you it's a skill. And the skill requires experience and seriously good knowledge of how to set up a good sounding hi-fi rig when you're not in control of all the parameters. Power coming in the room, the size of the room you end up getting, the acoustics of the room you end up getting. And I think that has a lot to do with why so much of our experience at audio shows is just lackluster. But there are rooms that do it really well. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely, they do it really well. Because there are guys out there that just have such a deep understanding of not just the electronics, but how acoustics work and how to make things sound a certain way. And I had a great example of this at the Toronto Audio Show a few years ago. I completely forget what company this was. I just remember one of the guys' names, Leonid. And he actually saved Thomas and Stereo's butt at the Montreal Audio Show this past year by going to help them tame the bass output on the speakers they were using in their room. This guy understands acoustic elements of a room.
You think, oh, great room, so you have a carpet. But the biggest problem, what you find out here, it's a concrete floor and subfloor. The piece of it just a plywood.
All right. Okay. And
so plywood, and here, concrete.
Like very few people I've seen. And I learned a lot spending one evening with them. They were describing how in the room that they had, it was so huge. They were just using subwoofers by adjusting the phases on the subwoofers to actually treat the room in terms of low frequencies, because the floor was patchy and it was like having a bunch of massive passive radiators all over the floor in this giant echoey room.
Hey guys, check this out, okay? Here is wood. Here is concrete. Oh.
No, right there.
Here is concrete. Think about the problem they're facing. Concrete and wood.
And they had like the flagship PMC speakers in there, like worth over $100,000 a pair. Yeah, well, those things can output a ton of energy. So great, they're in a large room for them, but the room's acoustics on their own were terrible. So he was using the phases in the subwoofers to cancel out the bass standing waves in certain areas of the room. Because like he showed me, he says, if you were coming to listen to the system and you stand here, just hit play, it was horrendous. It was bloated, it was boomy, it was disgusting. And because of that, there were other spots where it felt tinny and thin. I could have explained this to you and you would have rolled your eyes and saying, no, bullshit. No way you can stand in one place of a room and it'll feel boomy and you move just 6 feet away from that spot and it feels thin and light and like it comes out of a tin can. Yeah, it did. Then he showed me all the subwoofers that he had in the room and how each of those subwoofers were tuned at a different phase to counteract.
And a concrete, that's a subwoofer stand of wood.
Okay.
The standing bass waves that were in that area of the room. And when he turned them all on and they were all calibrated, now I could sit on any of the chairs and it felt like it was in the sweet spot. It was excellent. It was very impressive. He was also telling us that on certain parts of the day when people were just walking in and out, they would purposely have the speakers positioned in a way that the best sound was actually right when you would walk in the room, right around the doorway, because that would grab people's attention. And people would come in and there'd be so many people standing all over the place because it was one of those big rooms with a lot of demonstrations of electronics all over the place. So even if you were lucky enough to have the sweet spot chair, you weren't really listening because of the amount of people in the room and how they were all talking over each other and walking in front of you and whatnot. So he says when it was chaotic that way, he would set up, again, the phases of the subwoofers that he had across the room. I think he had 2 or 3 across the room that were not near the speakers. And he would set it up in a way that it would actually sound better at the entrance. When he showed us that in the evening, I was floored. Anyways. So back to the whole experience and the journey thing. I realized that back in the day, I had my hands on really good hi-fi gear. Didn't know what to do with it. Didn't know how to make it sound good. There is such a thing as pairing the right source and the right type of cables between that source and your preamp or your integrated amp, and then pairing that with the right amp, and then pairing that amp with the right speakers. And again, the higher you go in caliber and resolving and transparency and performance, things like cable start to make a difference. Or rather, the differences start to become more audible just because the sound becomes more transparent and less influenced by noise or artifacts coming from, if it's a digital source. Anyway, with them. So, and I see this even today. Well, people will ask you, how do I get this great sound? And although I love Thomas from Thomas and Stereo, and I think Thomas is an amazing person, and he knows a hell of a lot about hi-fi. Man, a hell of a lot. And there's a lot of things that he knows and has more experience than I do, but I've come to realize recently that there are some things that I now have more experience and understand that he doesn't yet. And there's some things that, like he told me, he says, you should make videos that like properly explain how you got your rig to where it is today. And there's so many factors to consider. And judging by a large amount of feedback and comments, both on his video, my videos, emails even that I get, I'm reminded of myself 8+ years ago. If someone would have really told me what the basics and the foundation were to achieve sound that is so emotionally present and 3-dimensional in your room, where it is hard for your brain to differentiate this being a musical recording versus this is actually someone performing in front of you, I would have just denied it. Because out of, like, let's say the 20 variables that need to be looked at, because a hi-fi end game is not, you got to get 4 things perfect. What are those 4 things? People think, got to get a hell of a good pair of speakers. It's really resolving, really transparent, and can perform in any kind of room and give justice to any music genre. Okay, get an amplifier that can take that speaker, control it like nobody's business, and make that speaker shine, and then the pre-amplifier that will actually properly massage that audio signal and adjust the gain to just the right amount with the right impedance match with the amplifier so that the amplifier can do its best work. And the fourth thing is the source, whether it's the DAC, a turntable, or whatnot. Again, another set of features. But it's more than just those four things. I know that now. But if I would have been told that it's not just those four things, I wouldn't have listened, because I already had my mind made up in those days. Just like a lot of people today in hi-fi have their mind made up. Based on their 2, 3, 4 system, 4 component experiences that they've had. And I look at a guy like Aaron. Not only has he been around the block, the guy's a freaking rocket scientist on top of it. So on top of it, he also understands the mechanics, the physics. He has a good idea of how all this can happen. And even to his point, and even like a guy like OCD Mikey even said, and I agree with this, we don't know what the actual recipe is for really good sound. That's why everyone is doing it somewhat differently, because there's no one recipe that makes the reproduction of music feel magical every single time. There's too many variables involved. So I think that cataloging our journeys through these YouTube videos is really cool, but I think it's giving most of the people some kind of guideline. But that's all you got to take it, as a guideline. Guidelines, just like rules, at times should be broken so that you can maximize your experience based on your scenario and your context. I know, it'd be a lot easier to just have someone make a big fact sheet that says, all right, starting point here, asks you 3 questions. Based on your answers, asks you 3 more questions. Based on those answers, 2 more questions. Based on those answers, all right, here's the list of gear you can contemplate for your source, your preamp, your amp, and your speakers. Voila, you're set, you're done. That doesn't exist yet. There's just too much to factor in. And then everything's subjective and speculative. Why? Because we all hear things differently from one another. So I think that it's important for all of us to actually have some kind of a journey. This is the fun part about being an audiophile. If you just want to listen to music and want to be happy and stop all this, then that's not being an audiophile. The fun of the audiophile is to try different gear occasionally and to change things up, because you get to re-experience your music in a different way. It's a learning adventure for our ears and our minds. It connects us to all kinds of childhood memories. There's some there's all kinds of anyways, you get the point. I think people have to still do their own journey, make their own mistakes, because there's a big difference. I've said this in a video before. There's a big difference between you knowing the theory and your mind actually understanding the theory so well that you're capable of making an analogy out of it, or you're capable of translating that information to any context or any situation. And that doesn't come from just reading. You have to live it. You have to experience it to really understand it. So a lot of the gear that I used in the past, boy, I'm going to call it's like I have 3 different audiophile personalities now. I have the emotional mind audiophile. That's what I used to be. And a lot of us actually start out as, where you make up your own biases, you make up your own truths based on what you've read, what you enjoyed reading, what things that you're capable of understanding or thinking that it makes sense. For instance, until you've actually experienced until you've actually experienced through many trial and error what the impact is of having quality electrical current and reducing the amount of noise in the current to go through a hi-fi rig that is transparent, I don't care what anybody's going to say. Nothing will convince you. As a matter of fact, that's why a lot of people think that a fuse in a DAC won't make a sonic difference. In a transparent DAC, the fuse makes a big difference. Any component in these things makes a difference. Had I been told that 8, 9, 10 years ago, I would have laughed. Like, I would have thought whoever the person told me was an idiot. Yeah, sure, whatever. Snake oil. And I thought a lot of those things because I also had bad experience with hi-fi brands that I used to think in my bias, my self-made bias, that these companies were some of the best. And the first times I experienced those companies, I was very disappointed. For instance, when I used to look at magazine articles that would show the mastering room at Skywalker Sound, the gear used for a period of time, I don't know if that's still the case today, was Bowers & Wilkins 800Ds, Chord electronic and amplification. I thought that combining those was going to be the most epic sonic experience ever. And about 18, 20 years ago, I used to work for a company, and the owner of this company was a hi-fi enthusiast. And he had went from a full stack of McIntosh gear and McIntosh speakers and so on and so forth, and decided to actually change his main system and use his McIntosh system as a secondary system in another room. So his main system, he decided to go and get Bowers & Wilkins 802Ds, or they Ds, D2s, don't remember. And he also got a Chord preamp, a Chord power amp, and I think he had the version of the equivalent of the Chord Dave at the time. And one day I was lucky enough, I had to go over to his place to help him out with something, and I got to hear the Bowers & Wilkins and Chord combination. I was very polite. I told him it sounded amazing, and things that were stellar and amazing was the amount of detail. The amount of detail and the resolution was scary. It was insane. It really was like having a crazy maxed out HDR VR headset, but for your ears. But man, there was no emotions. Like we listened to it for about 15 minutes, and I was tired after 15 minutes of listening to the system. So I walked out of there baffled, and I was like, man, are people crazy? Why they spend this kind of money on Bowers and Chord electronics? Didn't like it. A lot of things I didn't know at the time, but his room was these big 10-foot windows, which the speakers were shooting directly at these windows. And you had this little tiny leathery couch that had zero absorption material, like these little tight leathery things. Sound was bouncing off of this thing. And with big cathedral ceilings. So the amount of reflection coming off the big window panes that were there is probably what was destroying my hearing. But at the time, I was like, my emotional mind was like, bro, this fucking sucks. What the hell? Are these people idiots? They don't know what good sound is. But over time, and that stayed in my mind for a long time, because as I started to understand things, my brain would go back in time in my memories and my experiences and be like, remember the Bowers & Wilkins and the Chord electronics? Remember how much that sucked? And then I was like, yeah, but wait a sec. Remember those glass panes everywhere? That cathedral ceiling. And God knows what else was going on there. So my analytical mind now, when I think back about it, I no longer think that Bowers and Chord is a bad match. No, I don't think so at all. Guaranteed it's got to be something good. If Skywalker Sound used that in their mastering studios for a long time, Skywalker Sound. None of the movies sound bad. None of the stuff that comes out of that thing that I've heard sounds bad. It sounds incredible. So, as much as I was Mr. Know-It-All emotional audiophile at the time, I knew absolutely nothing. What felt real to me was my reality at the time. But now, time has passed. A lot of experiences has happened. I got to listen to a lot of stuff. And now I understand when I think back. Now the wise mind kicks in and reminds me that there's context to be applied in everything. And this is also why probably that if you don't understand context and how you need to make certain adjustments to make some hi-fi gear sound good together or sound good in a certain type of room or in a certain space, that's why a lot of people say that there's a lot of snake oil out there. Don't get me wrong. Some things are probably snake oil. I haven't tried everything. I'm sure there's greedy companies like anything else in life that make a product really is a sham, want to charge big dollars for it, and it doesn't really do what it claims that it does. Or it does, but it's such a specific scenario that it doesn't apply to most of people, so most people who will use that product won't like it. But the few individuals that fit into that scenario are probably experiencing sonic bliss like nobody has ever experienced. It's possible. Yeah. I mean, I had the same experience with Class A equipment. Man, was I disappointed when I used that. It just felt thin. It felt flat in terms of stereo imaging. I was very disappointed. But man, now today, going back, the impedance matching between the preamp at a time and the amplifier wasn't great. No, wasn't great at all. And as a matter of fact, I think that the voltage output was too high from the preamp to that amplifier. It was killing all of that amplifier's dynamic range. It just didn't work. It sounded terrible. McIntosh makes a very, very high quality DAC, the D150. It's expensive. I had both the D100 and the D150 in 4 different systems. I didn't like it. Never liked it. Actually, it sounded okay when it was paired with the Cayenne 845 amplifier and the Verity audio speakers. That sounded good. Every other system, nope. In a uncharacteristically McIntosh way, McIntosh usually to me has a very warm, there's an emotional sound to it. It's not something that you just get overloaded in details. It's not bright. This goddamn DAC, when I had it in the bad systems, sounded bright, sounded sluggish. It just wasn't great. And I've had experience with Sim Audio, Moon. My brother purchased the 280D DAC from Moon, which is about $5,000 DAC. So I got to use it for a few months. While I was using this DAC, it didn't sound bad, but it didn't sound great. To me, it was just, meh, okay. Had I spent $5,000 on this right now, I'd be pretty damn disappointed. Why? Because I'm not impressed. But I was comfortable listening to music, and I realized that when I gave it back to him. And I plugged my AudioBite DAC back in, and I was like, AudioBite is the baby company, I think, of Rockna. Rockna makes world-class DACs. Anyway, once that Moon DAC was gone, man, I was crying. It's like, wow, my DAC sucks. Yeah, sure, there's a lot of flashy. It felt like a big fancy V-curve now was coming back out. Big, strong, punchy bass, high, airy, high resolution, but the emotion was gone. Everything just, it sounded impressive, but fake. So it was one of those, you don't know what you had until you lost it. That was my experience with the Moon 280D. While I had it, didn't like it. Idiot. As soon as I gave it back to my brother, I was like, oh, damn. No, that was a great DAC. Fuck's wrong with me? So many learning experiences on that. Tons of learning experiences on that. So I like watching all the other YouTubers in hi-fi. I do. I watch most of them. I don't watch all their videos, but I watch a lot of them. And it's when I don't agree with them in some of the videos that it actually makes me reflect. I used to be like, when I didn't agree with someone, I would dismiss it and be like, you're an idiot, gone. Now when I don't agree with someone, I go to the drawing board, I start doing research, I start looking things up, I try to educate myself. Like, what am I missing in my equation that is making me disagree with this person? Because nobody's crazy in that world. We all feel what we feel. We're all experiencing what we experience. So today, when I disagree with someone, I love it. I love it because it makes me learn. 100%. That's why I made a comment on again, Aaron's Audio Corner, just because I've been watching a lot of his videos recently, because especially with the whole tecton crap that he had to go through. Whatever. There are some YouTubers out there, I would love for them to come into my room, similar to what Thomas did, listen to my rig, and then just dish out what they feel, what they experience. Tell me what you think, what just happened. Was it sonically good for you? For you? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Thomas beyond loved it. He said it was a top 3 system he's ever heard. Now, do I think that every other YouTuber will come into my room and say that? No, because I have audiophile friends that don't say that. To them, they've heard things that sound way better. But man, Aaron is one of those guys. If I could ever make it happen, I would want Aaron to come and review my system. Tell me what he thinks is good. Tell me what he thinks is bad. And from an engineer's perspective, try to tell me why he thinks that is. And that would make for fascinating conversation. All right. So yeah, would love Aaron from Aaron's Audio Corner to review my system. Someone else I absolutely want, and there's a chance that this will happen one day, James and his partner Kelly from ABX Audiophile. Partner. Internet. His buddy. Jeez. Yeah, James from ABX Audiophiles, absolutely. And James and I have talked about this. I really want him to come and experience my system. I also really want to go and experience his systems. Would love to do that. Absolutely would love to do that. Someone else that I would love to go and experience their system is OCD Mikey. 1000%. I'd love to experience that. New Record Day, Ron. His audio shed, or his music shed, I forget what he calls it. It just looks so freaking cool to hang out in there. I would love to go and experience that sound system. Maybe one day. And he is also someone that I'd be curious to have his opinion. He has a lot of open baffle experience, and I always like his approach. I'd be curious also to hear Jay's from Jay's Yagi's room. I'd be very curious to hear his room. He's one of the people I'd love to have a conversation with, and both of us experience the same thing, and then share notes and debate about it, because I think I could learn a lot. I'm just saying this from a selfish perspective. I don't assume that these people would learn anything from me, but I know I would. Yeah. And it's funny because one of the channels that I used to disagree with all the time was Gene's channel, Audioholics. Today, now that I have, I guess, matured a little bit, I respect the hell out of Gene. Gene knows what he's talking about. He really does. And I'm sure that he's made some statements and comments at some point in his journey, even though he is an engineer, from what I take it, that I bet you he has a different opinion on today than what he used to have in the old days. Maybe like talking about cables and stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Anyways, long rant. Can't make a huge production video. I gotta head back to the hospital later today to see my son. So leave you guys with this note. Your kids, your family, guys, most important thing. Don't take any of the time you have with them for granted. Because when things go south and life seems to choose things. So anyways, spend time with your kids, your loved ones. Listen to music with them. Thanks for tuning in.